Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm going to try to walk you through my process for doing a vector illustration. So you can see here, I've got some sketches I've done of some like simplified little potion bottles here. And I'm setting up my file now, getting my palettes together, pulling those all in, and getting ready to kind of work on this. Um, Now, when I go about these, I try to have a fairly refined sketch and start there. And I want my palettes kind of set aside already because, quite frankly, I have a pretty specific like mindset when it comes to what colors I'm going to use. And then what I'll typically do is set my pen tool to outline, and then down to like a 1 or half or even a quarter point, and then just start going from there. Now I'm recording this voiceover after the fact, so you'll have to forgive me if I get a little bit lost in my own process. And obviously this is at ×3 speed, because quite frankly I didn't think anyone would want to sit through 40 minutes of this. But really you can see where a lot of my process is using simple shapes to begin the illustration, and then using tools like the shape builder tool to refine those shapes further, or just kind of make them make more sense. Now this is opposed to what you might see a lot of people do, which is just straight up tracing. Um, and I do that too, but in this case I felt like, hey, there's already a really nice arc there. I really want just 2 of those. Let's really focus on making those basic shapes. So you finish the cork top, got the glass bottle, and then we want to go ahead and start some of the other things that I know I'm going to need there. So like a big round circle ellipse for the shadow. I'm also creating an outline here that will also help serve as the outline of the bottle. That's kind of my style, is these chunkier outlines. You could say like coloring book, or I don't know, like just more graphic, more cartoony. And a lot of that you do with the offset edge tool, uh, really, where you're trying to get that really nice outline of the entire shape, and using that tool is probably, I think, at least in the stuff that I do, is probably one of the most common tools that I use. Is I'm always trying to look to make a surrounding shape or an inner shape using a negative offset. All right, and then obviously we have other things that we need to go ahead and get figured out here. So we want to get that shape of the actual liquid inside the potion bottle, and like really simple. Like we're looking here at essentially what amounts to a square with a curved ellipse bottom, and you can see I'm just using the corner tool there to bring that in, and then the top is literally it's super simple. It's just a curved line, so it's really 2 points. And you can see here where I said, okay, well, I can do it 2 ways. The one is to create this really specific shape, and I'm even heightening that shape afterwards. But I could see a scenario where, like I'm doing here, you just mirror it. And it's a little underwhelming at first, I would have to admit. Like, looking at it, I'm like not like terribly like happy with the results. But as you kind of refine things and find, okay, is this going to be able to work? And as I found with a lot of these projects is, you might hate the line work, but when you start adding color to these things make a lot more sense. And you'll even see within this, I'm not really adhering necessarily super close to the sketch details. And the reason for that is because the sketch is tiny, first of all. It's, maybe it tops like a half inch in the book. But the shapes need to go somewhere specific, especially when you move them to vector, for this to still have character and life. And so you don't want that any of those ellipses to create a weird tangent or be somewhere you don't intend them to be. So really, putting them somewhere purposeful, designing your shapes with that purpose in mind, is super important in this step. And again, still just kind of muddling through the shape builder tools in order to create, I believe what I'm doing here, yep, is using them to create the wrapper that goes around the potion. And I've got some little intentional offsets cut into that right here, just to give it a little more character, make it feel like a faded thing that you might find on this. And I always am a big proponent of reusing shapes. So if you like a shape one place, chances are you're going to like the character of that shape in another. So flipping it, reversing it, mirroring it, scaling it are all really good tools so that you've developed the language where that shape exists in other places in your art, even if it's not recognizable. The viewer has this kind of sameness, and you haven't really changed your shape language. Um, I have done a ton of this wood grain effect in a lot of my work, and you can see my technique for it is super simple. Really just taking a line, drawing them out really easily, making sure they're scaled and they're like proportionate where I want them, and then just expanding that shape on the line work only, and grouping it together as one solid thing. And there you go. You have everything you need right there. And then, of course, getting rid of any of the excess parts of those wood grains by taking the kind of the framing shape. You can see the cork bottle here, and using that as your cutaway. It's one of those things where you're going to run into, I mess it up a couple times, but really learning how the shape tool is going to behave in any scenario really can help you. You have to build that experience, and like, hey, I figured it out. Now, I've got this to a point where I can move on to color, and that's what I'm going to do next. So moving on to color, I find the easiest thing to do is really just to start throwing some stuff up onto the page and see what sticks. Um, in almost every case where I could be using a black or a dark gray, I'm going to be using this navy blue color. And that's just because it's such a dark navy blue, and really it's ubiquitous in my work because it goes with so many things, and I use it for like almost all the shadows. It's really something that I found very useful, and we know from like our rules of light and shadow that we don't ever use like a pure black for shadow. You always want to tint that with color, and so that's again super useful. It lets you use those principles, but then it can color, it can kind of inform your design in that you're like, okay, well now I have this beautifully navy blue, which means that I'm almost thinking in a different spectrum, right? I'm almost thinking in a different way about the rest of the colors. I don't want anything that's just plain gray or plain black or plain, you know, 50% black anymore. I want colors that all have a hue to them. So even like the brown that we've used is a very desaturated brown for the cork, but it's something that has that still. It's like, I'd say, what is that, a 30% gray with a little bit of warmth to it. All right, and as you can see now you can see how that shape that we built for the potion liquid actually came into handy. It didn't turn out as kludgy as I think I felt during the line work, right? We've really refined that and made that look purposeful. Not quite symmetrical, but enough so that you go, oh, okay, there's some thought in the shape language here. And then when it comes to these things, as long as these colors aren't touching each other, I find that using the same color or bands of colors is always a great idea. Is limiting the amount of colors that I'm able to use in any illustration actually helps me think about shape placement, color usage. Um, what am I doing there that makes sense, or what doesn't make sense? And I'm going to waffle back and forth on these colors a few times, and use a couple different variations to really until I land on something I like. Now, the potions are kind of unique in that they're going to use a lot of opacity, and that's really something that I love in that in vector work. Um, And you know, it's one of those things I think that you just have to be comfortable with using effects or not. Are you going to use effects in your vector work? If so, you have to know that there's going to be some difficulties in the way printability and things like that. I wouldn't recommend, for example, taking this straight to a printer and printing it out. But for digital work, for sharing online, for sharing with you folks, or even for maybe some limited use with like animation stuff, it actually works out okay. And you can see the effect we got here is essentially there is a somewhat transparent bottle shape that both goes behind and in front of the potion liquid. And I'm kind of just fidgeting with it, trying to get it just how I want it because I don't want it to be 100%. I don't want to be 10% transparent across the whole thing. I want to create areas of more and less light to create some visual interest um, and create some banding of colors and things like that. And so I'm just kind of fine tuning that gradient. I don't know, for some reason I felt like the gradient still used to be a little more intuitive. It's fine, it used to be a little more intuitive. So I've landed on my basic colors. I've got a little sheen there on the bottle. I've got some shadows going on in the background. I've chosen a background color, just again going with that navy blue. That again is just really throughout a lot of my work. And then using the color picker to take advantage of the colors that I've already used in the artwork, and then applying it in different ways, so that I'm still in the same color wavelength, but you know maybe I'm reversing it. So as you can see in those bubbles in the lower part of the potion, they're in a lighter part of the gradient, but they're actually the darker color, so that it creates a you can see that transition. Now I could see doing that pink of the potion bottle all in one color and then doing a darker pink, but in this case I've limited it to two colors and I'm pretty happy with the results. And then I think at this part really I'm just trying to do some cleanup. The shape builder tools, Pathfinder tools can sometimes give you some uh, like unwanted shapes, unwanted leftover parts, and so that's what I'm kind of getting rid of. And then creating a nice clean silhouette of the bottle to then place my texture, which is something that I'm going to do with almost every work, is that without this texture I feel like all of these illustrations feel far too mechanical, far too computer. So you can see we're going to go ahead and apply that, and it's got texture now. It's got noise, it's got a little bit of life, it added color, which is really unique. And then what we can do too is you can take things that you don't want necessarily to be colored and put them above. So like the sheen on the bottle can go above the texture and just kind of look like it is supposed to look like, a highlight. And with that, we're kind of wrapping up here. I'm going to go ahead and make dartboard a different size so that the potion fits a bit better, and fix some of those final things. Please give me a like if you like this, if you learned something, if it just kept you entertained for 10 minutes. Give me a dislike if you disliked it. And if you feel that any of my content's worth it, feel free to give me a subscribe and a notification bell. I'm Mike Harris. You can find me at mikeharrisdesign.net, or emailing me at mikeharrisdesign.net@gmail.com. Hope to see you soon, and feel free to give me any ideas for upcoming content, things that you'd like to see, tutorials on Illustrator tools. I know it's not the most intuitive software, and I'm actually happy to kind of teach others on it. It's one of my passions when it comes to design. All right. Anyways, thanks and bye.